Hi and welcome to this video log with me, Wayne, from SwimCycleRunCoach. Well, Chris Froome had a disastrous Tour de France. I think you can say that for certain. And all in all, it wasn't an incredibly competitive Tour de France. Nobody seemed to run away with it. But I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I would be previewing this book that my son gave me for Father's Day, Chris Froome, The Climb. And I think as soon as you start this book, you realise that perhaps Chris Froome's bad luck that he had in the Tour de France, if you call it luck, is something that seems to follow him. Right at the beginning of the book, chapter 1, he again has an incident that doesn't hurt him, hurts someone else. But that seems to be a theme that recurs throughout the book. Certainly, he has an interesting story to tell, being brought up in Kenya, not quite the same way as most of the other English Kenyans that were brought up. His parents, although they were initially wealthy, did lose their wealth, and his mother had to work very hard to keep him and his two brothers in the style to which they were accustomed to a certain extent. But certainly he was by no means a rich Kenyan, although he clearly was much richer than the black Kenyans that he chose to mix with. And he certainly mixed with the locals, and again, that was exceptionally unusual for a white Kenyan to do. There was seen to be a divide. He entered places that were perhaps dangerous for a lot of white Kenyans, but being young at the time, he A, saw no wrong with it, and B, wanted to do it. He wanted to mix with the local population, and I think he likes the local population a hell of a lot. Certainly, as you go through the book and experience his early life, you learn of someone who is prepared to be an individual, and I think that probably is Chris Froome's biggest positive feature. He's prepared to be an individual. He doesn't necessarily do the things that other people would expect him to do. Right from the beginning, he worked his butt off and was prepared to really go into the red in his training and his racing. And his decision to leave the Kenyan Federation and come into the British Federation was one that I think he took with a hard heart. A hard heart not because he didn't see the benefits of going to the British Federation, but because the people that he had cycled with all his life were Kenyans. And when we talk about Kenyans, we're talking about black Kenyans. And I think he saw himself in that respect as dragging those black Kenyans down if he stayed in the Kenyan Federation. He wasn't necessarily what they expected, but he knew that the Kenyan authorities would hang their coattails on the Chris Froome story, and he didn't want that to happen. He is an interesting man, and if you want to read about his disagreement, if you like, or the conflict between himself and Bradley Wiggins, then read the book. He doesn't dislike Bradley Wiggins, I don't think, but I don't think he thinks Bradley Wiggins helps himself in a team environment. Perhaps Bradley Wiggins' comments of late have also helped to cement that opinion. But certainly this book is worth reading. It starts off a bit awkwardly, but then you warm to the man and you warm to the Kenyans and the Kenyan cycling way of doing things. Certainly you see a little glimpse of the corrupt nature of officialdom in somewhere like Kenya, the South African nations. For that, again, it's well worth a read. Chris Froome is an unusual person in the cycling sense. He's come from a different background. He's come from a hard background, a background where other people were naturally rich and he didn't have that sort of money. He had to work it out for himself. So it's worth a read to find out how this man has achieved greatness in terms of cycling through an adversity to a large extent, not having the things that other people certainly had. Chris Froome, The Climb. I'm putting a link to the book and its ISBN on here. You can read it, buy it. It's well worth it. I think you'll like Chris Froome a lot better after you read it than if you don't read it, because he's a shy man and he isn't very forthcoming in interviews and things like that. So I would suggest that if you want to know the man, if you want to know what the story behind that tremendous success, and it is a tremendous success to win the Tour de France, buy the book and read it. Excellent. Okay, next week we'll probably be looking at the Commonwealth Games in greater detail, and seeing if we can learn from anything that's happened there. It's been an excellent Commonwealth Games for the English Triathlon Union, or British triathlon as a whole, and I think the races, especially the team relay, were very interesting. One thing's for certain, Alistair Brown is back and he's better than ever. Okay, have a good week, see you next week.